So as we get into kind of Trinities talk, there's this bifurcation of Latin and social Trinities, and some have said that's kind of artificial, calling it Latin, whatever. But it's what we have now today. Do you buy that bifurcation? And even if you don't, can you explain what people mean by Latin and social Trinities?
Yeah. Well, just to stage set that, the doctrine of the Trinity is just that God is three hypostases in one ousia.
Yeah.
Or the Latin is tres personae una substantia, which is commonly translated, God is three persons or individuals in one being or substance. And all three of those persons is divine and at least deserves to be called God. So that's sort of the nutshell doctrine of the Trinity. And then we have this bifurcation between different ways of thinking about the Trinity. There's the Latin way, and then there's the social Trinitarian way. The Latin Trinitarians think God is just one self. There's just one first person perspective in God. There's just one I that relates to others, like as you, as Parker. I relate to you
Right.
in a certain way. There's just one I that relates to others in a certain way in God, according to Latin Trinitarians. No, the challenge for Latin Trinitarianism is to try to explain how this single self can be tripersonal. And one way of thinking about it is very, very kind of popular, simple way of thinking about it. It kind of traces the origins of this, could trace to Augustine, is that the Father has an image of himself in mind.
Right.
And this is a perfect image. And this perfect image of the Father is the Son. So the Son is like the mirror image of the Father. The Son as a perfect image of a perfectly loving and just and beautiful being. This image warrants the love and affection owed to such a perfect being. And the Holy Spirit then is identified with this relation of love and affection that exists between the Father and his image of himself, which is the Son. So that's sort of the Latin way of thinking about the Trinity. And you get certain philosophers today trying to come up with different ways of thinking about it. Leftow has his favorite way of thinking.
Time travel, right?
Right. Yeah. The time traveling Rockettes. The persons are different temporal parts of God. Well, we don't need to get into that, but so that's Latin Trinitarianism. God is just one self. And then the challenge there is to think about how this one self could yet be three persons. Right. Now, in contrast to Latin Trinitarianism, there's social Trinitarians who think that there are three distinct selves in God. There are three first-person perspectives in God, three eyes, as it were, like centers of consciousness in God. And the challenge here is to try to explain how these three selves, identified with the persons of the Trinity, can be one single being. And I like this way of thinking about it. A nice way of thinking about social Trinitarianism is just as we are one soul with a mind, the Trinity is a soul, an immaterial substance with three minds. God is a soul with three minds. I like that way of thinking about how social Trinitarians want to break it down. Now, social Trinitarianism is associated with the Greek-speaking fathers, the Cappadocians, such as the Gregories and Basil, whereas Latin Trinitarianism is associated with Latin-speaking fathers like Augustine and Aquinas. I mean, of course, there are debates about the historical accuracy of these associations. Right. And I think it's been pretty conclusively demonstrated that this distinction is not really accurate to draw between the Greek and the Latin fathers.
Right.
Because you have some Latin Trinitarians among the social Trinitarian, Greek-speaking fathers, blah, blah, blah. It's historically inaccurate. It's dubious for that reason. But as I've described the views, they're useful labels. The titles have stuck. So for better or worse, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad to hear you say that. So my audience will notice that when I'm speaking with more of a Latin person, I probably seem to agree with them more. And when I'm speaking with someone on the social side, I probably agree with them more. And that's not me being duplicitous. Well, maybe it is, but it's just because I find both like really convincing based on who I'm talking to, based on the arguments. And it seems to me, someone's going to get upset by this, but like the historical guys, the guys who are more bound by history, and I would say bound sometimes in like a negative way where they can't get past history. They want to say this is what the church has always said. This is and so yeah, it may be a mystery. It may be confusing to think of one consciousness in God, and but that's what everyone said. So we have to keep saying that. And if you want to, traipse all over history, that's on you, and that's your problem. And then a lot of the social folks that I know are more. I know this is painting with a broad brush. We're more philosophically informed, and they're saying like, well, what do you mean by person then, dude? Because you don't have three persons there in your Latin view, and and so internally, I'm just being ripped apart. But I really like your view, uh, and so I want to motivate that really quick with something that I've done in a paper to try and I kind of hold more to like Crisp's and James Anderson's kind of Trinitarian Mysterianism, which is not super impressive. It's just it's a mystery, but it's warranted. And so I tried to motivate this with a consciousness discussion because I was studying philosophy of mind at the time. But with Nagel's consciousness criteria, there's a what it's likeness, and so just asking, 4 questions. Is there something that it's like to be the Father? Is there something that it's like to be the Son? Is there something that it's like to be the Spirit? And is there something that it's like to be God? And I think that Christians should probably say yes to all of those, right? Like there's something that it's like to be the Father in a different way than it is to be the Son. Otherwise, you don't have any distinction between the persons and the Spirit, right? And there's something that there's something that it's like to be God. And whether you say that's just, in 3 ways or whatever, like God is conscious as well. Like you can pray to God. You can direct your prayers without having to pick out the Father or the Son, maybe. What do you make of that criteria? Does that just fall apart real quick, or?
No, I think you're right that there is something it is like to be the Father, Son, and Spirit. And this phrase, there's something it's like, is often associated with like phenomenal conscious states.
Right, right.
States. Like there's something it's like for me to taste a strawberry.
Hmm.
There's something it's like for me to see red. And I think persons, or at least some kind of persons, we'll get to this later, they are phenomenally conscious in this way. There is something it is like to be me. I think that's true of the Father, Son, and Spirit. I don't think that's true of the triune God.
Okay.
I don't think there's the triune God has phenomenal states of. And this goes to the distinction between the different kinds of persons that I think there are. That doesn't mean the triune God is not a person. That just means he's not the kind of person that has phenomenally conscious states.
Okay.